All righty.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. This is Earl Morgan. Oh, I'm sorry.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening. This is the Earl Morgan Hour. I'm your host, Earl Morgan, back with another segment of our program, another program for you on GoPro Radio. This week we have a really good show. I'm excited to have author Walter Dean Myers, who has written numerous books. He's very prolific, won a whole bushel full of awards for his writing, and he is going to be here to talk to us about his work. And I'm going to talk some about some of his of the books he's published, and he'll be back as my guest on the hot seat. And while I've got your ear right now, let me tell you that if you're listening and watching us on GoPro Network, you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and most important, you can donate to GoPro Radio at www.goproradio.com. There's a donate button on your screen. Press that button, and whatever you can give us at this festive time of year would be appreciated, so we can keep on bringing you our programs. Let's start with, first of all, our segment on book notes. Twitter, and you can follow us on Twitter on the Earl Morgan Hour. Again, you can get us on Facebook and the Earl Morgan Hour. And again, I'm going to say the donating to www.goproradio.com would be a big assistance to our network. Thank you very much. I'm going to start tonight with book notes, and I'm going to start talking about a few of the publications that are connected to tonight's guest, Walter Dean Myers, who is an old friend, lives in my town, Jersey City, but has written scads of books. I've got a few of them here in front of me in the studio. One of them is Monster, about a 16-year-old boy who's facing life in prison and the terrible ordeal that it worked on his mind. There is another book I brought with me, the Journal of Joshua Loper, who was a black cowboy back in Texas. And the story of his existence and his traveling the Chisholm Trail, which you may or may not have heard of. It's a very famous byway of the West where cattle were driven to the stockyards, mainly in Chicago, and got the whole business of cattle ranching off the ground from Texas through the rest of the country. And then there's another book I brought with me. These are only a few, mind you, entitled Invasion. And this is a sequel to the other books that Walter has written, Fallen Angels and Sunrise Over Fallujah. Now, his original book, Fallen Angels, was about Vietnam. Some of you, it's probably a little before your time. Others will remember it well. And I remember reading that book and thinking, Jesus, he's really captured the feel and scope of Vietnam. He must have, been there and absorbed the atmosphere and smelled the gunpowder and whatnot. So I asked Walter, when did he go to Vietnam? He said, well, I've never been to Vietnam. But he is such a good writer, he knew how to evoke the spirit of it and the feel of it in a way that makes me feel like I'm never going to be the writer he is. He's also received numerous awards for his writing. He's been all over the country speaks to children often, been in many detention centers for youth. He's in a lot of prisons, and he sees what is going on. He has a perspective of what is going on with our young people who are being incarcerated at a staggering and alarming rate. I mean, we all know about that. All right, now we're going to go to another segment, but before I do that, there's one thing that I would like to tell you about that Walter has that we will speak a little bit more about. He has these buttons he gives away and the button says, reading is not optional. In today's digital Twitter world, that message may get lost, but believe me, it is very, very important that we read. I have to keep reminding my grandkids that as useful as the web is and the whole digital revolution, there is no www.calmwisdom.com. That is something you have to learn to experience through writing, through reading, and through living. And it's important that we continue to do that. As a person I call myself an addicted reader. That's why I wear these glasses, incidentally. I actually read myself into them. But as an addicted person, I can tell you that it is an enriching experience. And the wonderful thing about reading is that you can go anywhere in the world you want in a book. I've done that. I've gotten into a book and I've been transported to another country, to another time, to another century, and I've learned things. And I always tell people the importance of developing reading in your mind. We don't have sharp teeth. We don't have sharp claws. We don't run very fast. Our only natural defense is our brain. And you need to develop and make that facility, that organ of your body, as sharp as you can. And reading often is a way to do that. Plus, it tells you can keep up with what's going on in the world and know how to make decisions, or better decisions, hopefully, if you're reading a lot. If you can, try to get a book maybe a month. Now, me, I used to read 3-4 books a month. I got older, I can't do that anymore. But I would say I still try to read at least one book every week or one book every month. Some of the books are getting very long, and it's a little difficult for me to do. I'm supposedly retired, and I keep telling people I'll be in good shape as soon as I retire from this retirement. But it doesn't leave me as much time to read as I wanted, and I always thought when I retired I'd spend a lot more time reading. But I'm finding I'm spending a lot more time just living. For the young people, I would say it's wonderful to have the games to play and all of the toys and the tricks that you get from this wonderful digital revolution we've had. But get yourself a Kindle or go to the library and get a real book, which is what I prefer often, and just read. And you'll find that there's something in those libraries, which I haunt, that will interest you. You just have to go and look. You know, it's very funny. I was thinking last week that I was at the library one day trying to find out some information on a book, and this Indian woman was in front of me, and she wanted to take out some more books. But she had too many books on her already. She'd already taken out and hadn't returned. Then she pulls out a second library card, and but she couldn't take any books out on that because she'd also filled that up. And I looked at her and I said, you ought to be the poster child for libraries. I mean, this is what it's all about. This is a place that you can also find, if you don't want to read a book, you can find audio books. Now, I've tried those. They don't work too well for me. But I have friends who do the audio book thing, and they say it's very helpful, very useful. They can read while they're driving or while they're doing something else. I did try one. There was a book that was out not too long ago called Too Big to Fail, which was about the banks that almost destroyed the worldwide economy, as you remember, a few years back. I always say the book was too big to read. It was a mammoth, colossal book. Very informative, but very, very, very long. All right, now it's time for us to move into another segment of our show called Right Jab, which is some of the outrages that have taken place from our friends on the far right. And this week, I'm going to be talking about a certain Texas state senator. Texas is a very fascinating place, the great state of Texas. A lot of things can be said about the great state of Texas, but last week, State Senator Bob Rucho declared that U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts and the president has done more harm with the Affordable Care Act, at least more harm to the USA, than the swords of and this is a quote, the swords of the Nazis, the Soviet Union, and the terrorists combined. Close quote. That's a fat statement. I mean, really. You can't make this stuff up. The troubling thing is that guys like Rucho run for office and actually get elected. And what does this say about a substantial portion of the country's electorate? I don't know. But mind you, the U.S. fought a war, in fact, a world war, against the Nazis, who were responsible for the death of millions of people in dozens of countries, not to mention the millions of Jews who perished in Nazi concentration camps. The most infamous terrorist attack, at least on American soil, of course, was the destruction of the World Trade Center towers in New York that cost 5,000 lives and $1 million in property damage. The Affordable Care Act, on the other hand, seeks to provide 40 million Americans who are without health insurance a remedy to that problem. Somehow I don't see how that is the same as the swords of the Nazis and the Soviet Union. But to get back to his original statement, in terms of the horrors of these other incidents or other historical phenomenons, the Soviet Union, well, America never actually had went to war with the Soviet Union. Instead, both the nations fought a quote-unquote Cold War, using a number of smaller, weaker states across the globe as proxies in their ideological battles. And thousands of supporters on both sides were killed in these little vest pocket wars. The troubling thing is that this is the way that the right wing is now gone so far to the right that it's falling off the edge of the earth. Another interesting thing is, and right punch would be, the Rand Paul, the U.S. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, who was trying to move the Republican Party along the path of broadening it out so that it's just not turning into a party of old white men. So they opened up an office in Detroit that was called a African American Outreach Office. Somehow that itself sounds paternalistic, but they opened the office and Senator Paul went to speak. Now, Senator Paul was famous for saying on a television show that he didn't completely back the public accommodations law because he thought that people ought to have the right in the business to decide who they were going to serve, which of course made him quite controversial at the time. But he shows up in Detroit to speak, and now understand, Detroit is bankrupt. Most of it because of what's happened in the last 10 years, and some of it because of the policies of its current Republican governor. But he shows up to speak at this outreach center. Now, the photos that were taken of the outreach center meeting an event, and the television coverage of it shows just white people. Now, there were a couple of black people sprinkled through, a little pepper with the salt, but by and large, it was just a convocation of whites. They didn't seem to be having any kind of luck developing any kind of rapport from this Senate, at least not yet. And this is the same Rand Paul who had a guy working for him who ran around in a wrestling mask made of the stars and bars of the Confederate Party, and was involved in a hosting and producing a secessionist event. Now, he since apologized for some of the things he's done because he said it didn't help his boss. But the right still is kind of Looney Tunes as it's been for the last 2 or 3 years since Obama's been president and drove them all kind of crazy. We shall see what kinds of insanity they dream up. You could almost bank on them dreaming up something new. In Detroit also, they decided that they would not cover in the insurance policies rapes and abortions. So now women have to, in Detroit, go out and get special kinds of riders to cover those things. You can't, again, you just can't make this sort of stuff up. You wouldn't think this is real life. All right, we're going to break, and we'll be back in a few minutes with more of our program. Stay tuned to GoPro Radio Network.
The views and opinions expressed on GoPro Radio Network shows are solely those of the speakers and are not necessarily the views or opinions of GoPro Radio Networks, Inc. or its affiliates. These broadcasts are provided on the understanding that they do not constitute professional advice or services. Individuals who speak in these broadcasts express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions. GoPro Radio Networks and its affiliates do not necessarily endorse or oppose any particular opinion or conclusion discussed in these broadcasts. You may not edit, modify, or redistribute these broadcasts in any way without the express permission of GoPro Radio Networks, Inc. GoPro Radio Networks assumes no liability for any of your activities in connection with these broadcasts or for your use of these broadcasts in connection with your website, computer, or playing device.
You want to know the truth, folks? Do you really want to know the truth? Well, perhaps you can't handle the truth. But if you can listen to GoPro Radio. Tune in at www.goproradio.com. Now, have I made myself clear?
GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head. I know I do.
You're listening to content developed by the GoPro Radio Network, the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
All right, we're back with another segment of our program, and it's something that's I've been thinking about a lot. And I had a conversation with someone last week about reading and about the problem that we seem to be not teaching reading well. Or for that matter, we have schools that aren't teaching cursive writing anymore. I guess they figure because everybody's got a keyboard, they don't need to learn how to cursively write. This is, the name of the segment is Spin the Bottle. And we're spinning the bottle to come up with these new ideas, these new thoughts I've had. And there are kids that don't know how to write. They know how to print, but they don't know how to write. And you can't print your name on a deed for your property. You have to know how to write. The other thing is that the reading scores are not are not doing well in our schools. We're not teaching people to read. And I was talking to someone not too long ago, and they said to me, we need to unretire Spot. Now, Spot was a dog who was in our readers when I was in my first grade reader was Spot, Muff, Dick, Jane, Sally, and the mother and the father. Now, this was an intact nuclear family. And the reason that I mentioned it is because that's how I learned to read. And I can remember the only thing that always puzzled me about it was Spot always went bow wow, and I have never yet heard a dog go bow wow. The other thing, of course, is that was a long time ago, and we had the Dick, Jane, and Sally, and we had our Think and Do books and our phonics books, and that's how we learned to read. And somebody decided that wasn't a good idea, and instead they've instituted several dozen reading methods, none of which seem to work very well. Now, to show you that I think that what they did with us worked, to draw on some personal experience, my children went to a school where the first grade teacher came in and said, I cannot use DC, GIN, open court, whichever one of these methods that the board of the school had recommended. And she said she was going to find something else because she couldn't teach reading with this. So lo and behold, what did she come up with? Dick, Jane, Sally, and Spot, Think and Do books, and phonics books. The interesting thing was that between the first and second grade, the students in that class, including my daughter, learned how to read. By the second grade, they could read anything. And I used to watch my daughter. I'd ask her to walk down the street and say, what does that word say? Point to something. And you could watch her taking it apart in her head and putting it back together again, learning how to sound it out. Now that worked. Why don't we do that again? Why do we have to spend millions of dollars on reading methods that don't seem to teach anybody how to read? I don't know how you folks in the audience feel about it, but I'd be very interested in hearing your views on this, because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that what they're doing is working. I don't seem to be able to find it that way, but again, that's my opinion. You may have one of your own. So if you do, please call us at 714-888-7444 and voice your opinion. I'd like to know what the audience out there thinks about all of this. Also, I want to remind you, you're listening and watching GoPro Radio Network, and this is the Earl Morgan Hour. And you can follow us on Twitter at the Earl Morgan Hour, and you can also follow us on Facebook. And, of course, you can watch and hear us on GoPro Radio Network. And if you are watching us on GoPro, I'm sure that you see the donate button. And, being that this is a gift, this is the time of giving and gifts, we would appreciate any kind of donation that you can send to us here to help us keep our operation alive, because it costs money to do all of this, and we have a wonderful group of people here, but they also have bills to pay and responsibilities to keep, financial remunerations that are necessary for that. So if you can, please donate to GoPro Radio Network. We would appreciate it. Again, I would like to hear from anyone who out there in the audience who at 714-888-7444, that's our number, you can call us, to let me know whether you think maybe we could do a better job with the old method of reading. Sometimes, you have to go back into the past. Doctors are using, oddly enough, insects to draw blood from people now, slugs. They're finding that that works, and if it works, it works. There's no need to change it. Sometimes we change things for the pure hell of changing them, and it doesn't always mean that something new is better. Something new is not always progress. I often say, when people talk about change, I say, well, change, yeah, but I'd really rather have progress. And sometimes I think we confuse the two. So if you're interested in calling and letting us know how you feel about this, call us at 714-888-7444. We'd be glad to hear from you during this segment of the show, or even after the segment of the show. We'd like to know how you people out there feel about some of these issues. And we all know that reading is we should know that reading is important. If you don't have any objections to calling, let us know. And if you do, you might have an opinion here that other people would like to share with you. So give us a call and tell me how you see the business of getting our reading up to snuff. I mean, we are behind a lot of other countries rather, who are just beating the devil out of us about reading. You can also voice your opinion on our Facebook page and at the Earl Morgan Hour on Facebook and on Twitter. We would like to also have you call us on your contact us on our Twitter feed and let us know how you feel about that. And call us here at the GoPro Radio Network at 714-888-7444 and let us know what your feelings are about the reading deficit we seem to be having and how we can solve that. There's nothing wrong with watching television. There's nothing wrong with going online and reading, but you have to understand that to get through life, as other societies and other countries know, their children are just leaping ahead of us by miles in the ability to read. I can remember, just as an example, as a reporter, I remember one day, and these are people who should know. Reporters are usually people who read a lot. And I mentioned something about the Scarlet Pimpernel. Now, I don't know if any of you out there all of you know who the Scarlet Pimpernel was, but it's a character in English literature. And I mentioned it to one of the young reporters, a young lady, who turned to me and said, "What's the Scarlet Pimpernel?" She'd never heard of it. And, it was took me back because everyone in my generation knows who the Scarlet Pimpernel was. We're losing a lot, and we need to keep up. You can always understand that there's value in the past and the present. We tend to want to think that, well, that happened yesterday. It's not that important. There is all yesterdays are built on the yesterdays before yesterday. History is important. What happened, what went on, who did what, is one way for us to hopefully avoid the mistakes in the future. Hopefully. The human race does seem to perpetuate history by making almost the same mistakes. History never actually repeats itself, but it does often look like it is. And a lot of that is just because we're not aware of what happened in the past. I often think that if we were more aware of what happened in the past, we might not have blundered into Iraq. Iraq was just another... Well, we did that in Vietnam. We got into a war we didn't need to be in, and we couldn't get out. And we spent, nearly 20 years there killing off a lot of people before we just left. The same thing can be said about Iraq. 9 years we spent there. History could have taught us something about that. If we'd have read about the creation of Iraq and how it was a country that was sort of thrown together after World War I by the British and the French. It wasn't even really a country. Or the fact that now that America had decided that Iraq was a bad guy, if we'd have been paying closer attention to history, we might have remembered Donald Rumsfeld, who became the Secretary of Defense, going to Iraq and shaking hands with Saddam Hussein, who was the villain that we went to Iraq to depose and eventually did. But he was our guy. What happened? I think that we make these kinds of mistakes because we don't really pay much attention to history. If we did, we wouldn't have blundered into that. We wouldn't even have blundered into something like Vietnam, which was a kind of a same problem. The people who, Ho Chi Minh, who was the president of Vietnam, admired the United States so much he modeled his constitution on it. We decided that after the French left, we had to go and stop the communists. Well, Vietnam is still communist, but they're our friends. We're trading with them. Nike's making sneakers over there. And we killed a lot of people didn't seem very much of anything. We're coming up on a break. And after the break, we're going to have our guest, Walter Dean Myers, here in the studio. And I think that you'll find him a fascinating person to just listen to. He has so much to tell us. Thank you very much, and just stay tuned. We'll be back after this break on the Earl Morgan Hour on the GoPro Radio Network. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a great opportunity. If you have a product or a service, a talent or something important to say, now's your chance to have your very own radio show. Whether you're just starting out, a veteran looking for a professional platform to enhance your presentation, the GoPro Radio Network is the premier place to cultivate and share new and exciting content. We'll help you to grow your audience and keep it growing long after your first broadcast. Now you have a voice. Call 212-696-8562 today or visit www.goproradio.com, and you'll be amazed at how easy and affordable it is to have your very own show on the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
GoPro Radio, the fastest growing network in the galaxy, is leaner and meaner with a new attitude, new technology, and a brand new lineup. Tune in and get wired every Wednesday, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern with the BCS Experience featuring Byron C. Saunders, formerly of New York City's WBAI. Then at 6 p.m., it's the Black Agenda TV Express featuring sought-out political commentator Glenn Ford, formerly of America's Black Forum. Then at 8 p.m., it's time for Kay Thompson Live with the legendary radio host Kay Thompson of Inner City Broadcasting's WLIB and her son, renowned actor Eric Payne, who starred in such films as Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, Drop Squad, and many more. Then, at 9 p.m., it's Food Rap, featuring Nina Markel, a.k.a. the unofficial mayor of Jersey City, and former Viacom marketing guru Shauna Glover. Last but not least, at 10 p.m. Eastern, it's the Sexy Party Show with the bad boy of dating Mr. Locario of I Love New York fame and his partner in crime, Miles Cunningham. So get wired every Wednesday from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern only on the GoPro Radio Network, www.goproradio.com. Listen to the voices in your head.
We're back at the Earl Morgan Hour on GoPro Radio Network. Again, if you have anything that you'd like to impart, an opinion, a point of view, you can call us at 714-888-7444 and let us know how you feel. You can also share your opinion on our Facebook page at the Earl Morgan Hour on Facebook and on our Twitter feed also. Right now we have in our studio author Walter Dean Myers, who has written numerous books and who has gotten many, many awards, many recognitions for his work. I first met Walter, I guess, 20 years ago. And I've personally read many of his books. And he just makes me feel like I can't do this, you know. I'd like to be a writer, but I don't know if I have the ability to grab people's attention and come up with these topics the way that Walter does. So before I go any further, let me say thank you for being here, Walter. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me, Earl.
And let's talk about a little bit about your bio, about who you are. He's a best-selling author. Born in Martinsburg, West Virginia. At the death of his mother, he was sent to Harlem, where he lived with his foster parents, the Deans, from the age of 3. And as a child, he began writing poems and short stories and found solace in books. I understand that. I did the same. At 16, he dropped out of high school and joined the Army on his 17th birthday. After serving 3 years in the Army, he worked at various jobs, including factory assembler, construction worker, employment interviewer, and mail handler in the post office. His writing career began with the publication of some of his short stories in men's magazines, the National Enquirer and literary quarterlies. In 1969, he won the Council on Interracial Books for Children contest, which resulted in the publication of his first book, Where Does the Day Go?, by Parents Magazine Press. Using meticulous research and his own life experience to inform his writing, Walter Dean Myers has since written more than 110 books. He has received almost every single major award in the field of children's literature and is considered one of the most preeminent writers for young people. Walter Dean Myers is the New York Times bestselling author of Monster, and I have a copy of that. Now we'll show it to you. The winner of the first Michael L. Printz Award, the 2012-2013 National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, and inaugurated New York City's Literary Honorees. He is the author of 2 Newbery Honor books and 5 Coretta Scott King Awardees. In addition, he is the recipient of the Margaret A. Edwards Award for Lifetime Achievement in Writing for Young Adults. A 3-time National Book Award finalist, as well as the first ever recipient of the Coretta Scott King Virginia Hamilton Award for Lifetime Achievement, he was the 2010 United States nominee for the Hans Christian Andersen Award. Walter Dean Myers currently lives in Jersey City, and you can visit him online. What is your website again, Walter?
It's walterdeanmyers.net.
Okay, walterdeanmyers.net. You can share your opinion with us here at GoPro Radio at 714-888-7444. And again, if you're watching and listening online, we have a donate button, and we'd appreciate it if you give the idea of giving a donation some real thought. Walter, I've got a couple of books in front of me here. Just a couple.
Okay.
Because if we bought all your books in here, there wouldn't be room for us. The ones I've got in front of me, the one that stands out to me is the book called Monster. Tell us something about Monster.
Well, I've been going to prisons and juvenile detention centers for a quarter of a century. And when I realized that so many young people get caught up in the system, so to speak. I was reading this morning about this judge who was putting kids in prisons in Pennsylvania because he was getting kickbacks. If young people expose themselves to the juvenile justice system, number one, they're liable to be in a prison. Number two, kids should not be making decisions on the street. Those important decisions should be made in the home, with the family, so that when you go into the street, you know how to react to something. If someone says, let's do something that's somewhat shaky, you should understand, and you should know. You should be pre-armed, so to speak. And so I wrote Monster. As a matter of fact, I was at a trial when I got the idea for the book down at 595 Newark Avenue.
In Jersey City.
In Jersey City.
That's the Jersey City courthouse.
Around the courthouse. And then all of a sudden, it was about a few minutes past 3, there was this huge noise outside, and the judge said, "Oh, we'll have to wait till that's over." I said, "What was that?" And that was the kids getting out of the school. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, this poor defendant, who was only like 18 years old, might have been going to that same school just 6 months earlier. And so, I'm just, what could I do about that kind of thing? And what I thought I could do about it is to write something that would make kids think prior to acting. And this is what this book is mandatory reading in the city of New York and in many places around the country now.
Let me hold up a copy of this book. I've read parts of it. I can't say I read it all, but I'm intrigued with it. It's like many books that I get into. Once you open it, once you crack the cover and begin to open it, you can't stop. It becomes like, I don't know, ice cream. You can't, you love it, or like potato chips. You just can't stop. And I recommend this as reading for everyone, and especially for children, because our children are at great risk at this point. And something has to happen. Some kind of intervention has to happen on a very grand scale.
They're at greater risk now than any time during my lifetime. When I was coming up in Harlem, what we had in Harlem is that if you dropped out of high school, you could get some kind of a factory job. You could eventually sort of settle down and mature. And what's happening now, if these kids are not only is the ladder broken, the ladder to success, but kids are giving up at 12 years old and 13 years old. They're just giving up the struggle.
I was talking to the curator of the Jersey City Afro-American Museum, and one of the things that he said, and I've noticed myself, that the kids are kids, so that when they're in their 3 and 4 year old periods, they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and absorbing everything. They're not stupid. They learn to read, they learn to walk and talk. So they're not, they're normal. But by the time they're in the 3rd grade, he said, and I've noticed the same thing, the light begins to go out of their eyes.
The light begins to go out because education does not take place only in the schools. Education takes place in the streets. Education takes place if the kid doesn't get breakfast in the morning. All of that is part of the educational process. And what the child sees in his neighborhood is more important than what some teacher is telling him. And if what he sees is the people who look like him are failing, that is his major educational input.
Well, let me ask you this, Walter. After reading your bio, don't see a lot of college there, or any. How did you use what you knew or what you'd learned to turn yourself into a award-winning author without having going through that whole process of college? Okay,
first place, there's a lot of luck involved, a lot of luck. But I was a reader. And so as a reader, what I would do is simply, once I finished a book or finished going to a movie, I would extend the story in my mind. I would extend the story. I would read, if I read Huck Finn, or if I read even David and Goliath, I figured that if Goliath had beaten David, I could back him up, I could back him up. And I kept extending these stories. And what I'm doing as an author is the same thing. I extend the stories that are in my head. If I see something on television or radio, or I read something, I will take that story and just extend it in my mind. What if this happened? What if that happened? And this is
That's what writing is. It's what if. We have a caller, and let's take this caller right now before we go to break. Caller, you're on the air at GoPro Radio Network, the Earl Morgan Hour.
Hello?
Yes, we're here.
Yes, this is Nikki.
Hello, Nikki.
Yes.
And what do you have to say?
Yes, I just have a question. I wanted to know why write children's books? I think as far as writing, I think it's actually more difficult to write for children because you have to be really creative and imaginative. And why choose to write books for children? Like, what is your reason behind that? What is your passion about it?
Well, my passion is, I dropped out of high school. I dropped out of high school first at 15 and then at 16. I dropped out of high school. I was in scads of trouble, and that so influenced me.
I have to interrupt you for just a second, Walter. Don't stop where keep your thought, because we have time. We're going to move into a break, but I certainly want to hear the answer to that question myself, having once tried to write a children's book, realizing the difficulties. Hold on, we'll be right back. Please, caller, don't go anywhere. Audience, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the Earl Morgan Hour on GoPro Radio Network.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a great opportunity. If you have a product or service, a talent or something important to say, now's your chance to have your own radio show. Whether you're just starting out or a veteran looking for a professional platform to enhance your presentation, the GoPro Radio Network is the premier place to cultivate and share new and exciting content. We'll help you to grow your audience and keep it growing long after your first broadcast. Now you have a voice. Call 212-696-8562 today or visit www.goproradio.com and you'll be amazed at how easy and affordable it is to have your own radio show on the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio. Listen to the voices in your head.
You're listening to content developed by the GoPro Radio Network, the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
We're back with on the Earl Morgan Hour with our guest Walter Dean Myers, author of how many books, Walter?
110.
110 books. Wow. I just want to tell you that you're listening on the GoPro Radio Network, and if you wish to call in, you may do that on 714-888-7444. Just before we went on break, Walter was responding to a question from a caller about why children books. Continue, please.
Well, one of the things, when we talk to kids, very often, we're saying one thing and they're hearing something different. We're saying, why do you want to be a rapper? Why do you want to be in the NBA when you're only 5 feet tall or something like this? And what they're hearing is define success. So when we tell a kid to live this way or live that way, change your life, I know I've been through that. I'm the kid that was the high school dropout. I was a kid that fought with a gang. And I was a kid who joined the Army at 17. So I think that I know what these kids are feeling. And so I feel almost obligated to write for them.
Is that why you visit so many juvenile detention centers?
I visit, I was just in a juvenile detention center in Omaha, Nebraska. I was in one in Las Vegas. I was one in Deadwood City, South Dakota recently.
There actually is a Deadwood City, South Dakota.
There's actually, very much so. And all these places have growing populations of young people who are being incarcerated.
There's something wrong here, very fundamentally wrong with our system, our society, because there's a growing number of young people in jail or in some kind of a detention center or some kind of a juvenile justice or criminal justice center. Everywhere it's growing. And now the numbers of women going to these facilities is beginning to grow. Not only black women, but white women. It's
right. Well, when we have a problem and it looks hard to solve, we walk away from it. We say, let's just walk away from this problem. So we're having families in distress, families that don't have jobs or who are underemployed. And when they are underemployed, the anxiety level in that family is so very high that the kids suffer. And when the kids suffer, the kids act out, and they're disappointed, and they're hurt. And we can't give them hope. And so they do bad things. And many kids are being abandoned at ages 4, 5, and 6. And for every kid that is in these juvenile homes, there are other kids out here in group homes, and that I also visit.
Well, one of the things I keep saying, or I keep thinking, is that we're now living in a time when people are attacking our school system as being inadequate and wrong, and I'm not saying that's not correct at some point, and that they don't have a point when they say that. But I believe that a lot of the problems that our children are having are problems they bring to the schoolhouse door.
Well, they do bring many problems in that they begin school as between 5 and 15 months behind. But that is what's happening in our society generally. You have this great divide. You have in a city like Detroit that's bankrupt, right? But what's happening to the kids in Detroit? Okay, we're talking about the economy of the adults, but what's happening to the kids? What's happening to the kids in Cleveland and Newark? So or Camden. So you see, the economy is falling apart. One of the things I noticed, Earl, when I go to adult prisons and I'm talking to young men, usually in adult prisons between the ages of 20 and 35 years old, they all have kids. They all have children, and I'm saying, who's raising your
what's
kids?
Happening to those
what's
kids?
happening to those kids?
Well, we have a caller here, so we're going to take our caller and see what they. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Yes. My name is Rich West. And first of all, I'd like to say I love your show, your program. It's very, very good, Mr. Morgan. I would like to ask your guest, since he writes so much in and around about two young people around the prison industrial complex. Where does he see the future of black people who I believe are oppressed? And one of the ways the oppression manifests itself is through the prison industrial complex. Where do you see the future of young black people in the cities?
Well, is it
getting better? Will it get worse? Or I know because you have a show and awareness is very, very important. But beyond that, what does he see?
It will get better if we, as a community, involve ourselves. This is the same as in 1865. You had all of these African Americans who were newly freed and who could not read. The communities got together and began schools and began to take up the problems. They did not leave it to the government, and they did not leave it to the school system. In the South, where 85% of all of us lived, nobody wanted us to go to school, and so we understood that. We understood they did not want us to have education, so we took up the challenge ourselves. If we do that today, then we will succeed. If we don't, if we wait for someone else to do it, I'm very pessimistic about it.
We have another caller, but before I take that caller, I just want to do two things. One, I want to hold up this button Oh, I'm sorry. We have a button here that says reading is not optional. And it says Walter Dean Myers, and at the bottom of it, it says Kalamazoo Public Library. Could you explain what this is about, Walter?
Well, I want to change the attitude toward reading in this country, especially within the African American and minority communities. Reading is not something that should just simply add to your life. You either will read, and not just read a little, you will read well, or you will suffer.
Thank you. One other last thing as we're about to wrap up our show. You have a medal around your neck. Would you tell us something about that?
Well, for the last 2 years, I've been National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. I've been traveling around the country and preaching the same thing. We must give our children the gift of reading.
Thank you, Walter. It's time for us to wrap up the Earl Morgan Hour. It's been fun. We could do this for another 2 hours, but I'm afraid our time has ended. Thank you very much, Walter, for being with us. You have to come back. We have to continue this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Earl.
And for my audience, thank you very much. GoPro Radio Network, tune in next time, same time, 7 o'clock Wednesday. Well, no, we won't be on the air next week because it's the Christmas holiday, but we'll be back soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.